So she is my virtual mentor. And Joanna happens to be a New York Times and USA Today bestselling author, and of course, a nonfiction author as well. She's written 20 books, and that's in rather a very short period of time. And she's sold more than 450,000 books in 74 countries and 5 languages. All I have to say is, wow. She's also an international professional speaker and award-winning entrepreneur, and she was voted one of the Guardian UK top creative professionals in 2013. In addition to all of that, she's developed numerous courses, including how to write a novel, which we'll discuss today. And so welcome, 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 Joanna Penn.
Oh, thanks for having me, Frances. And I know what it feels like when you have technical problems just before the call. So you calm down a minute while we just say hi to everyone. And what I know this is your show, but just while you're calming down, I always like to see where people have come from. So I don't know if we're allowed to get people. So first of all, I guess, can people hear us? So you just need to type in the chat box on the right or the question box and see if people can hear us. So just type in there. I don't know if I can see those. So if you see people saying yes, and also where people are calling from, because I know we've got quite a few people on the line. Oh, there we go. California, Arizona. Oh, hello, Harley. Denmark. Oh, always love to see people from Denmark. That is a lovely place. Aloha, Frances and Joanna from Honolulu. Fantastic. Ohio. Waves. Oh, Harley's waving back. Fantastic. Toronto, Canada. Oh, lovely. So it's great to have lots of people on the line, and I guess you can hear us. Now, did you want to do webcam as well, Frances? You mentioned that, and then we had a few technical issues.
Yes.
Or do you have a screen? Because it says you haven't shared your screen yet. So
I don't have a screen to show.
okay, so well, that's fine. We can do whatever you like. But I'm happy to do webcam if you want webcam.
Yes.
Does everybody want to see our faces?
I think so, but I'm trying to figure out how to do that.
Okay, it's under the webcam. So I will share my webcam and hope that people can see that, because otherwise they're just going to get a screen.
Okay, there you are. Now I can
There we
see
go.
you. You can see me. Oh my
I
God!
can't see.
This is my first webinar. All
Oh, well, can people see us? Can people see either of us? Just say yes, you can see me, Joanna. I'm Joanna, pointing at myself. Yes, people can see me. Can anyone see Frances?
yes. Can you see me?
No. Oh, well, it's just me. Oh, now we can see your screen, Frances. You have to click the share my webcam, which is under the webcam. Excuse our technical issues, everybody. We literally, poor old Frances is having a difficult time. And while she's doing that, I will tell you what happened to me today. But basically, yeah, everyone can see your screen, Frances. So just under the webcam button, it's on the right-hand panel, there's audio, and then under audio is webcam. But while Frances does that, yeah, so today
I don't see it. I'm going to control of the mouse.
Okay. Well, don't worry. Everyone can just look at me.
Yes, they can look at you, and I will figure this out for the next webinar. I promise.
Okay, fantastic. Well, should we get on with the questions, everyone? And I think we are going to take questions from the audience tonight, aren't we? So
yes,
people hang in there. Yeah, hang in there. Okay. So
we're going to start now. I've calmed down a little bit, even though you can't see me, which is probably just as well. Anyway, so before we talk about how to write a novel, which I'm really looking forward to talking about and hearing about, I'd love to ask you, Joanna, about marketing. Of course, I'm going to ask that question. And specifically, which social media networks you started with, and I think you started with Twitter, and which ones you use now, and how you use those channels that you use now to fuel your incredible success.
Yeah, so social media in particular. So I did just check. You can check your Twitter birthday, and mine was middle of January 2009. And I think this is just the general thing, and I want everybody to take this as my #1 lesson. It's called persistence and time in the market. So basically, I started the Creative Pen in December 2008, and it was my third blog. So that's another thing, it's not always the first thing you try. Like the first blog I started was to go with my first book. It was called How to Enjoy Your Job. That was my first book, which is now Career Change. So I started those websites in 2008, and then ended up starting the Creative Pen at the end of 2008. And the first social media I got onto was Twitter, and then I also got on YouTube at the same time. I think I might have started my Facebook page around that time, but I've always been more of a Twitter person than Facebook. And the main reason was, I'm trying to remember the name of the book. It was by a guy called Don Tapscott. I think it might have been Grown Up Digital or Growing Up Digital. And at that point I must have been, early 30s, and I wasn't, I still had one of the old phones. I didn't even have a smartphone at the time, even though I think they'd started to happen. And my husband was like, why are you still on one of those old phones? And the big thing that made a difference to me with social media was getting a smartphone and being able, because I had a day job at the time, and being able to do it in the lunch hour or my breaks or in between things. So Twitter, and when I first got on Twitter, it's funny because I'm still friends with some of the people I met on Twitter back then. And, I started by following people, and then I started a podcast also in 2009. So I literally jumped into everything. Now, I know that some people would say, don't do everything at once, because in fact I would probably say don't do everything at once, because you'll get overwhelmed and you just won't be able to manage it all. But I definitely did jump into everything at once, and sometimes you don't even know what social media you're going to enjoy. So some people really enjoy Facebook. I do Facebook, but I'm not really good at it, although I've started doing Facebook Live, which is video, which is pretty cool. But generally I'm still really active on Twitter. I still have a YouTube channel. I haven't jumped on I've got a profile on Instagram, but I don't really use it. I've been more into Pinterest since I talked to you about 18 months ago. But basically, I'm really still using the main sites I started using back in 2008, 2009. And that's why on Twitter, I have like 70,000 plus followers, because I've just been using it for years. And, that's why I've sold this many books. And that's why I've got this big an email list. It's just because I've been doing this consistently for years. So that's my number one tip on everything for everybody, is don't fret if your email list is 0, or your Twitter followers are 0, or your Instagram followers are 0, or your YouTube channel is 0, because we all start there. It just takes time. And I was going to tell you what happened to me today. I interviewed a guy called Kevin J. Anderson, who is, I think we can almost see you. There you are.
You figured it out.
There we are, and I still haven't mentioned, I'm going to finish this story. Today, I interviewed this guy, Kevin J. Anderson, and he's sold 23 million books, and he's written 140 books, and I was just like, I'm so impressed with him. And basically he's been doing this for 40 odd years, and I've been doing this. I left my day job 5 years ago, so you could say 5 years full time. And before, I started my first book 10 years ago, but those first couple of books took a number of years. So when I look at someone like Kevin, I used to be, oh my goodness, I will never get there. But now I actually see how much you can achieve over time. And I just think it's all about persistent effort in a particular area for years on end. And there's no get rich quick around here.
No, but you've been a full-time writer for just 5 years, is that right?
Yeah, and I like to call myself an author entrepreneur because,
Right.
although I make almost 6 figures from book sales, this last year it was like 97,000 US from book sales, I make a good chunk of my income from courses, from speaking, from affiliates. So I'm an author entrepreneur. I make income from different ways, basically.
But even that's just phenomenal. I mean, I think of it, and I think it's a relatively short period of time when you just catapulted to success. I mean, it doesn't seem like
Well,
overnight to you, but
yeah, 10 years.
yeah.
Let's call it the old 10-year overnight success.
Not
No,
catapult.
I started writing my first book, that first book, which was called How to Enjoy Your Job or Find a New One. I started writing in around October 2006. So that really is 10 years. And that took me about 18 months. to write, and then I rewrote it in 2012 as career change after I'd left my job. So that one really, things just start slow and then they build up over time. And you're absolutely right. Now I can put out an email or a tweet or something or a podcast, and it'll go to thousands and thousands of people. But I had nothing when I started and got a whole load of things wrong at the beginning. And someone's just asked here, do either of you have an agent to get this kind of exposure? And the thing is, basically, I do have an agent now, but I only got an agent because of my exposure. So basically, my agent basically hasn't sold anything yet. So I've done all of this myself. And one of the things I've learned recently is I should pay more people to do stuff because I really do everything myself. Oh no, I don't do everything myself. I pay like an editor and cover designer and all that. But in terms of social media, I still do it all myself. That's me on Twitter. That's me on Facebook. It's
Incredible.
me on the blog, the podcast. This is me.
So you achieve so much and you produce so much. I mean, your thriller books, your nonfiction books, your courses, your speaking. What are your productivity tips? I mean, I always look at productivity and how I can produce more, but what are your tips? What are your strategies?
Since we're now on video, I can show people. So this is my diary this week. There we go. So I bought this with my first, this is a Filofax. Those of you under like 35 won't know what that is. But it's basically, I use this physical diary, and in there I schedule. So today I schedule like a maniac, and I schedule months in advance. I'm scheduling February 2017 as we talk in September 2016. So like 6 months ahead. I'll do some things that are more spontaneous, but in terms of interviews, podcasts, interviews, all of that, I'm scheduling months ahead. So for example, today I'm writing the first draft of a new novel at the moment, End of Days. So I got up at 7, I was at the cafe. I did 2 hours of writing, and then I met a friend for a coffee. Then I went to a co-working space and I did another 2.5 hours. So, and these are actually diarized appointments in my diary. So my first tip for productivity is, if you have a diary or a schedule or something, like a lot of people will have kids, like, do you put your kids' play dates in your diary? I bet you do. Or do you put your gym class or your yoga class? Or if you have a day job, you put your business meetings in and you get a train at a certain time, or your commute, whatever. So take your writing as seriously, or your writing business as seriously as you would any other appointment. So treat it like that, put it in your schedule. And then when you go to whatever place you're going to go to, whether it's a cafe or just your room or wherever, for the time that you have scheduled, then you must write. No Facebook, no Twitter, no whatever. Spend that time either thinking or writing first draft or editing, working on your creative business. And then other times, like now, obviously, then this afternoon, I generally do creative stuff in the morning and early afternoon, and then interviews like this in the evening, and podcasts and all of that type of thing. So my main thing is scheduling. And when I had a full-time job, I would get up at 5 and write before work because I just didn't have any energy after work. And then I eventually moved to 4 days a week, and then I went full time. So it took me 3.5 years to move out of my job into doing this full time. And by then I was making, several thousand a month. So, it was fine.
Yeah, that's good. One things that I do is I follow the theory of eating your frog early in the morning. So whatever that big project is, you want to do it first thing in the morning. And for writing a book, I find that I don't get it done unless I write it first thing in the morning.
Yeah, no, exactly. Yeah, absolutely.
So there's a lot of talk about Facebook. There's always talk about Facebook on the web, and there are posts about you should definitely have a Facebook author page. No, you shouldn't have a Facebook author page. And recently I've talked with a number of romance novelists, and they say that they're moving more towards Facebook groups instead of Facebook author pages. What do you think about this topic?
What's funny is I have a group, which is my private group for my creative freedom course, which is, my kind of top end thing. And but other than that, I don't have a group, and I keep thinking about it, and then I shy away because I need to spend less time on social media, not more. And I know what happens is, as soon as you have a group that you run, you have to spend a lot more time on it. So, but whereas with a page, I schedule, and this is another tip for social media. I schedule all of my content, and then I pop in and out and reply to comments and stuff. So I use Buffer app to Buffer app with Feedly, which I schedule, regular blog posts. I use meetedgar.com or Edgar, if it's just called that, to schedule my evergreen content. And I use the Facebook scheduling to schedule stuff on my page. So I find the group dynamic quite difficult because I much prefer the scheduled approach to work in general, and I find that I dip in too much already. So I absolutely agree with the writers who said that, and I interviewed Julie Huss, J.A. Huss, recently, and she said, yep, Facebook group, fantastic. But this is the thing. We all have to decide what we're going to spend our time doing, and that's something that at the moment I haven't done. Now, 2017 for me is going to be a big year in terms of fiction. So I don't know, I might do that, but generally, no, my fiction side, I have an email list, and I might even start doing Facebook Live video for my fiction page, but I don't have a group for my fiction.
Yeah. You talked about the theory of social karma, and I love that theory. I've blogged about it and credited you with a term, and I've talked about it in sessions and credited you with a term. But I think it'd be great if you could talk today with everyone about that theory.
Yeah, so social karma. I think you called it something else recently, didn't you? You wrote a blog post. I
Did I?
had just heard on the Selma Book Show. I think they called it a care. No? Okay. Well, anyway, I think if people listen to the Sell More Book Show podcast, which everybody should, they mentioned one of your blog posts on the show, which I just listened to like half an hour ago. So sellmorebookshow.com, I think it is on. Anyway, so social karma, to me, it's about you get what you give in general, as in life. And this is, I think, something very important in the indie community in general, because what I've seen some real posts recently about people saying, oh, everything's so negative and bitchy or whatever, and I'm like, this is a different world to the one I live in, because the internet world I live in is so nice and lovely and everyone's helpful and just wonderful, and I really think it's about the energy you put out there. So I will never leave a bad review. I just won't review, but I will leave good reviews on Goodreads, Amazon, because I'm an author. Leaving reviews is a pain in the ass. Sorry, language. But basically, what else? So I will share people's stuff on Twitter. I'll promote other people. The podcast is a great example. I, promote people a lot of the time. The stuff I share on social media is 80% other people, 20% my own stuff. So that 80-20 rule, that kind of sharing other people's stuff before your own, and then basically you get back, not often from the same place. So, like I interviewed you over a year ago, I think, and I didn't immediately then say, well, Frances, I think you should have me on your podcast or your webinar. It's not about going, oh, well, I've done something for you now, so you have to do something for me. It's assuming that if you are generous with your time and you're sharing and you help other people, that it will come back to you in some way, even if you don't know what that is. And I've found that to be true both in my writing life and just in life in general. It also makes it a much happier place to be, because somebody has success and you can celebrate with them, and I have my fair share of comparisonitis, but I always, if there's someone that makes me feel like, oh, I'm a little bit jealous, I will deliberately promote that person, because it helps me turn that slightly negative feeling into, oh, I want to be like them, as opposed to, that comparisonitis thing.
Oh, that's a good solution to that. I once in a while have comparisonitis. That's a good term also, and that's a good way to deal with it. So I want to talk about how to write a novel course. I looked through this course, and it's It's great. And I started writing a novel in the year 2000. It's, it's on the way back burner. I've since turned to nonfiction, but I am going to return to that book one day. And to write that book, I am going to use your course, Joanna, because I adore it.
Great.
So talk about the iceberg theory.
Yeah, so basically, like many people, and I'm sure people listening, I've spent the last 10 years buying books on writing. I mean, I must have so many books on writing, both, although I'm primarily digital, I do have some books people can see on behind me on the wall there. But basically, when I decided I would finally do a course on how to write a novel. I was going to do a book as well. And then I started rereading a lot of these craft books. And, now I'm writing my 13th novel. I thought, okay, I'm ready to try and teach this stuff. So I started, and after about a month, seriously, a month of trying, how to write a nonfiction book. It's basically lots and lots of kind of gathering it together, trying to organize it. And I realized that I couldn't teach this stuff. It was huge. I would end up with a course that would take forever. And I started the book and I'd already, I had like 40, 50,000 words and I hadn't even scratched the surface. And then I just went, this is crazy, because if you want to do that, then you go to Robert McKee's 3-day story workshop, or you write a novel in a year at a local college, or you do an MFA if you really want to go hardcore, take a degree. And I was like, okay, what do I want to do? I want to try and give people the minimal stuff that they need, because the biggest problem I think with all of us is overwhelm. So I'm overwhelmed, aren't we all overwhelmed with everything we have to do? And it was like, okay, so teaching somebody who, like yourself, writes nonfiction, or someone who hasn't written anything at all and wants to write a novel, I was like, okay, so we'll go with this iceberg theory, which is, as hopefully everyone knows, it's something like 10% of the iceberg is above the water and 90% is below the water. And this is what I decided. And as soon as this metaphor came in my head, I worked it all out. It was like, okay, you only need this 10% in order to write a novel. You do not need to know everything beneath the surface in order to get your first book out there, or even your 5th book or your 10th book. Actually, what I put into the course was what you have to know, things like genre, things like story structure, things like productivity, as you mentioned, things about character and plot. Those things are really important, but there is not a full module on how to do foreshadowing. There is, and there's not a full module on the hero's journey, although I mention it in story structure. So what I try to do is sort of give people the minimum that they need, because I just feel like you can spend the rest of your life learning how to write the writing craft, and I will, and that's my intention. But you don't need that to write your first novel. You can write, say, a linear story, and I use the Hunger Games as an example, brilliant example of a linear story with one main character, with a group of friends, who follows the exact 3-act structure, which has been around since Aristotle, and a character that we can root for but isn't nice all the time. This rising drama, danger, everything you could possibly want, and it's a very simple story structure, and yet it made Suzanne Collins millions. It made the readers readers are happy, readers love it. It made the movies. And that's the type of book we want to write, I think. So I suggest people start with something that uses those principles that you don't have to read 100 books to do, basically. So that was the idea, and I am really pleased with the course. And my husband said, why didn't you do this a year ago? And I said, well, to be fair, I couldn't have taught this a year ago. What I've learned through writing 12 novels is what I bring to it. And the reason I wanted to do it now was because if I go further, I will forget how hard it was at the beginning. So I want to teach it while I'm still near enough the beginning. Like Kevin J. Anderson, who I mentioned, who's written 140 books. I interviewed him for the podcast, and he's definitely forgotten how hard it is. And I was like, yeah, some of the answers to his questions, I was like, yeah, you've forgotten. It's been 40 years, and I will forget, I will forget too. So that's why.
So what is a successful author's mindset? You talk about it in a book, you talk about it in the course, but talk about it here.
Yeah, sure. So I think the first thing that's always really important to me is for the individual author to decide what is the definition of success. Because like I just said about Kevin Day Anderson, if my definition of success is selling 23 million books, I'm a long way off that right now. Now, I would like to be there, but that is maybe my 20-year goal when I'm more his age. My goal right now is to finish End of Days before Christmas. My definition of success 5 years ago was to leave my job and be able to support myself with my writing online. And then in the last year, I hired my husband out of his job, so that became another goal. So, but if you're listening and you're just starting, then maybe your definition of success is like holding one of your books in your hand, and that is a brilliant definition of success. So the mindset begins with that, with going, okay, this is what success is, and that's what I'm going to aim for. And a lot of writers don't do that, and then they spend their time just aiming for the wrong thing. So that's the first thing. Then, there's so many aspects to mindset. So probably the overarching reason I wrote that book, and again, that was a really hard book to write, and I include a whole load of my diaries, and right just there you can see them where my finger is on the video. Those are some of my diaries, and I've got lots of them around. I've written lots of them over the years, and I've included a lot of those diary excerpts in the book. But basically, the main thing is that everybody feels like you do. So everybody feels self-doubt. Everybody feels comparisonitis. Everyone feels like, oh my goodness, how can I ever do that? Or how do I learn all this stuff? Or, oh my goodness, it's so hard. Oh my goodness, I'm overwhelmed. Some people, you have a bad day. I'm not always upbeat like this, but I tend not to share the days when I'm down, but in the mindset book I do. For example, I share one diary entry from when I launched my first book, and it says, I cancelled my launch drinks. I am devastated. I'm so upset. This is just an anticlimax. This, nobody wants my book. It was, what was meant to be the pinnacle was not, but it was the beginning. And the whole point is to help people see that this creative process is a journey, and it's almost like a cycle, and you have to understand that we all go through that. So understanding your own creative process and realizing that we all go through similar issues, I think, is really important.
That was really good. I really liked that answer. Thank you. Now, I want to ask you about dialogue. When I think of good dialogue, I think of Ernest Hemingway, because despite the fact that he's very sexist in his writing, I really like Hemingway, and I love his dialogue. That's because I like short, succinct dialogue. But what constitutes good dialogue in your mind?
Dialogue is one of my challenges too, to be honest. And so I've spent a lot of time looking at screenplays, reading scripts, and also reading stuff aloud. So a really good idea for people when they're writing dialogue is either use dictation, because dictation you will speak in a much clearer way than you will type. So typing, you might write, I am Francis, whereas speaking, you'll say, I'm Francis. So that type of contraction, when we're taught to write properly, we often lose those contractions because we're told that that's too colloquial. But when you're writing dialogue, you have to be colloquial. So I think that's really important. But I think writing dialogue, some people say, oh, you have to go around and listen to people. I don't do that at all. I think some people are awful at writing dialogue, like H.P. Lovecraft apparently is the worst example of dialogue possible. But yet H.P. Lovecraft is like best loved author in the horror genre apart from Stephen King. And then you compare that, well, you mentioned Hemingway. Compare Hemingway to Stephen King. Yet Stephen King's dialogue is what makes him a modern classic. Like, his dialogue is incredible, but couldn't be more opposite to someone like Hemingway, because he goes on and on and on and on, and lots of it's very kind of working class characters. So I think what makes good dialogue is whatever suits your book and whatever suits you as a person, but you can make it better by reading it aloud to see whether it actually works. And remember to do things like contractions and, that kind of speech.
Yeah. A little known secret to me is I'm too afraid to read Stephen King. But I did read his memoir, and it was phenomenal. especially the part on, well, I understand what he's written based on his childhood, but I loved his advice on writing. It was
Mm.
really great. So I like this next question of mine. And what role does intuition play in being a creative?
Uh, I guess it depends how you determine intuition. I mean, I think curiosity, I use the word curiosity a lot. So, for example, with fiction in particular and non-fiction, although often people write non-fiction from a sort of answer a question type of angle, whereas fiction is more about what interests you. So, what are you drawn towards? What are you curious about? And I've learned to trust that curiosity when it comes to my books because I used to worry that people wouldn't find what I found interesting, but the reality is that most people find different things interesting. So I know someone who writes sort of knitting cozy mysteries. Now, I don't read cozy mysteries and I'm not into knitting, but that is a massive genre because there's a lot of people who love their knitting and they love cozy mysteries or mysteries where the dog or the cat is the primary character. I don't read those either, but again, really interesting. I like graveyards. I like Stephen King. At the moment, End of Days has ended up going down this into snakes. So I'm getting into like getting high on snake venom, and yeah, I'm not doing this myself, but I'm researching it. So my curiosity is going down this rabbit hole on the internet, and then I also use the word synchronicity. So synchronicity is a Jungian psychology where things happen that are more than coincidence. So, for example, a couple of things have happened with End of Days, and they happen with every single one of my books. But I went with my cousin for a day out. She wanted to go to an art exhibition at Salisbury Cathedral, which is an hour or so's drive from where I live. And I hadn't been there for years. Anyway, we went down there and we were walking around the church, cathedral there, and I look up and I see, and if people know their Bible at all, Moses with the brazen serpent from the book of Numbers. And this is the only time when God says, build a brazen serpent, like an image of an animal, which is usually forbidden. And I was like, oh my goodness, that is crazy because I use this verse in my book. And so now I've put this whole scene in the book in Salisbury Cathedral that I wouldn't have guessed would be there before this week. And that's a combination of synchronicity and noticing things. And this window is really high up above the main altar. And I was like, oh my goodness, I've never seen that in a church before because it's basically a pagan image. And yeah, crazy. So that's a combination of curiosity because I know that image, and also synchronicity because it's kind of leaning into the coincidences that happen that can drive interesting fiction or non-fiction, I suppose.
Right. You know, I have a whole list of questions I could ask you, but I noticed that we have 34 questions lining up for you, Joanna. She has a look of horror on her face.
Oh no, it's okay. I can see a lot. A lot of them are I can't see anything, or I lost the sound, or all of that type of thing. So
Oh, okay.
they aren't all they aren't all
Question.
video. Yeah, they aren't
Okay.
all questions. There was a question just saying, did I make 97,000 from just book sales? Yes, that is just book sales for last year. Um, and I do this every year. So there's a blog post on my site called Almost Six Figures, and I break down my sales by genre, by store, you know, like Amazon and Kobo and iBooks. I think it's really important to share actual numbers because as an indie, and you know, I think it encourages people to see this. You know, I'm not making 100 grand a month, and I don't think many people are, or 10. You know, I'm not. Well, yeah, I'm not making 10 grand a month from my books. I'm making that with other things, but I think that hopefully will encourage people. But yeah, so if people want to put their questions in the box, I think that was actually the only question
Okay.
there
Then
was. Yeah, so carry on while people write their questions in.
so you kind of answered one of the questions with your last answer. So um, what I forgot to ask you was, well, you kind of answered this before, but how do you collect your story ideas? I mean, it seems that you get your story ideas from noticing, if I'm right. if I heard you correctly. And then how do you collect them? And I know that Joan Didion and her husband had a box, and they would put all their ideas in the box, and then take an idea out as a writing prompt. But how do you do it?
Yeah, Woody Allen does that too. I use the smartphone. I use I use notebooks. There they all are. But I also use my smartphone. I use Things app, which is on the Mac and on the iPhone. And I just have a fiction ideas tab where I put down all my ideas, or I just write them down. I take a lot of photos, but mainly an idea will kind of percolate for years. So Destroyer of Worlds, my last novel, was based on I saw a statue of Shiva Nataraja in Delhi Museum in 2006. So that book took 9 years to come to fruition. And when I was ready to do it, I researched a lot about India and all that type of thing. So the main thing is capturing it, either writing it down physically or putting it into things. But I do believe that, and I do have a look through the lists, but I think that a lot of it just bubbles back up to the surface over time.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, there are quite a lot of questions now, so I don't know if you want to move to
Okay.
those or yeah.
Sure.
Mike says, I see many novelists use their first book in a series as a giveaway. How can those of us who don't write series use this kind of promotion? A short story collection or something like that. So I think this is similar for nonfiction, right? I mean, you don't necessarily have a series for your nonfiction, but you give something away on your site. So basically, yeah, I think it's just an example of your writing. So yeah, you can use a short story collection or one short story if you want. But what I would say, and the reason I write a series, there's a couple of reasons. One, because I do this as a business, and all the evidence points to the fact that series books sell more. I haven't seen any evidence to the contrary. I mean, there's a few breakout books like Gone Girl and stuff, but mostly authors who have a series will earn more money. And the second thing is it's much easier to write books in a series because you have the characters, you have the world, so you just need to come up with a plot, basically. But yeah, if you don't have a series, then use whatever you have, like a short story, or write a novella. So I use a novella. A novella is a shorter book, say between 25 and 35,000 words would be a novella. I give away Day of the Vikings, which links two of my series together, and I specifically wrote it to link my two series, and that's the book I give away. So I would say just write something, put up a short story series while you write something specific to give away. But I also have that on Amazon. I also sell it, so you can still do that too. Do you want to pick the next question?
Yeah, I will. So I think what we didn't talk about, that I wanted to ask you about today is, have you ever experienced writer's block?
Um, I think it would depend on how you define writer's block. So I think most writer's block comes from not knowing what to do. So for example, if you haven't filled your creative well enough, then you may struggle to have ideas. So some people think they're blocked because actually they haven't done enough research, or they haven't thought about the plot enough, or they don't know, they don't understand story structure, they don't understand how you do this. Other people are just really tired. So, after Destroyer of Worlds, I had a break, and some people would say, oh, I'm blocked, but mainly I just needed a break, because if you give everything to a book, then you're empty and you need time to kind of fill that up again. So I wouldn't say that I've suffered a block before, except that it took me a long time to write that first novel because I had a mental block around writing fiction. I thought that the only fiction that should be written would be something that I should write would be something like The Name of the Rose by Umberto Eco, so like a prize-winning literature, because I was brought up with literature. So when I got rid of that block and went, no, I'm just going to write genre fiction, which is really fun, then I was quite happy.
And it's fun to read, which answers Sharon Hamilton's question, if you ever take breaks between books. There's so many questions
Yes.
here.
Yeah,
Um,
definitely. I mean, I think time off is really important because, as I said, otherwise you're just too exhausted. So, yeah. And I know the kind of there's the indie must get out one book a month type thing. That's not me. And in fact, with End of Days, I just emailed my editor today and said, I'm not going to make my deadline. It needs more work. So I probably won't have that book out this year. So I will actually this year probably only have two books out this year, Destroyer of Worlds and the Author Mindset book. And End of Days will probably move to January because I need more time.
right, yeah. And you need to take that time. So there's a question from Elizabeth Wilkerson. How should new indie authors think about budgeting, and a launch? For example, an editor, designers, formatting, ads.
I think new authors should budget the most for editing because you need to learn how a book works. So, especially if it's fiction, I believe you need story edit or a structural edit before a line edit. So many people get obsessed with grammar and spelling. That's not what an editor should be doing. Like you should pay more for an editor who does structural and story edits. Grammar and typos you can do with something like Grammarly, or you can pay a proofreader for that type of thing. But an editor will help you actually structure a story. And so I think that's really important. Then obviously book cover design, professional book cover design helps. But if you're new, things like advertising, if you only have one book, I don't know why for advertising, because one book, this comes back to your definition of success. One book is not going to make a career. One book is not going to make much of a income. So you're best off, and many authors now say, wait till you've got three books to start advertising. So don't pay for advertising until you have more than one book for a reader to read, because a lot of readers now, the big readers who read a lot and buy a lot of books, will wait until there's more books than just one by an author, because they want to, if you like an author, you want to binge read. So I would say that definitely if you're new, then focus on editor, cover designer. You can do your own formatting. I don't know why I use Scrivener for my formatting, and only pay for have an actual strategy. For example, if you're just use a perma-free on Amazon, not a perma-free, use KDP Select and get reviews on the book while you write the second book.
That's really good advice. I actually use Grammarly, and you can get it. It just costs $135 a year, and it's worth getting, especially if you write blog posts or anything you write online. You should go through Grammarly. So I don't understand this question, but I'll see if you do. Your NL, you grow it organically, followers,
I don't
newsletter,
know,
maybe?
maybe newsletter. Maybe Sharon could specify. Sharon, please
We'll find
specify.
out. That would
And I'll do the one above that.
okay.
Would the alleged boost Amazon gives to new books be worth the risk of losing 20 plus positive reviews on a pair of stagnant standalone 4-year-old books to launch them as new with new cover-to-cover edits? Okay, so Bill's basically saying, should he pull the books completely and upload them as new, because they're a bit stagnant. Okay, so Bill, this is a tough one. I mean, personally, I just did a relaunch, I guess you could call it, on my Arcane box set #1, which had the first 3 books in the series, which came out 2011, 2012. So 4 years old, as you say. I put them in a box set and I just got them on the USA Today list, without having to pull them. So I would say that, yeah, get new covers on it, and then just relaunch them. Just relaunch them, because books are new to customers when they find them. So I would, try and get a book bub, do some paid advertising. But no, if you've got 20 reviews, the books are only stagnant because you're not directing traffic at them. So I would say get a traffic on that. If you've got a pair, so you've got a 2, I would basically pick the first one if they're in a series, or whichever one will help, and then refocus on that. Get some advertising on it. That's what I would do. I don't agree with pulling books to relaunch them, because Amazon, you still have to get 20 more reviews on it. Like, you have to start again. So I would just say no. definitely not.
And so I think we'll take one more question and then we have to let Joanna go. She's been so gracious to stay here this long. What is the best way to advertise your books?
So there's lots of different options. Probably the best place to have a look is that I wrote a blog post on how to hit the USA Today list recently, a couple of weeks ago. So I would just Google the Creative Pen USA Today list box set or something, and you'll get my blog post on that. And I give a whole list of the sites that I used to advertise. So that will give you a whole load of different options. The main thing is that it will depend on where your book is. So for example, not everyone gets a BookBub, not everybody makes Facebook ads work, not everybody can do all these different things. So there is no best place to advertise. It will depend on what level your book is, what genre you're in, which sites will accept your advertising. So yeah, basically it will depend. And I know everybody hates that, but probably the best place to start is Amazon.
Yeah.
KDP
Yeah.
Select. And no, I don't mind answering questions.
Okay. Want to take another one?
Yeah, I'm good for another 10 more minutes. So
Good.
yeah, we can go. Okay, so what do I think of KDP exclusive? Yes, so I've mentioned that a couple of times. I think KDP Select, which is their exclusive program, is great for new authors. So if you only have a couple of books and you then don't bother going wide. I mean, I love Kobo, I love iBooks, but they are very hard to get traction on unless you have more books, especially in a series. So I would say Amazon KDP Select is great for up to 3 books, or if you have standalones. So my book Risen Gods, which is a standalone, my only standalone, is in KDP Select. And all the rest of my books are wide. So I think it's great, but if your plan is to make this a full-time living, then at some point you will need to go wide, and at that point, that's when having a series is a really good thing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Do you want to pick another one?
Okay, coming back on Sharon. Sharon says yes, newsletter. Newsletter, how many followers? Do you grow it organically? Yeah, so basically you can find, I mean, for nonfiction, it's at thecreativepen.com/blueprint, and I've had that list going since 2008. And yes, it's been organically. Most of my stuff is organic. I've only started paying for advertising in the last year or so. For JFPen, it's at jfpen.com/free for my fiction, and again, organically. I've now started to do lead gen ads with Facebook to get people on the list, and of course I have that kind of call to action in my books just at the back, go get your free book here. But yeah, basically organically. I think just in general about paying for advertising, paying to get on lists. If you're new, it can be really, you can really think that, oh, if I just pay $100 for this thing, everything will be amazing. And I just don't think that's true. I think that a lot of this stuff, you have to focus on a specific goal. So, I definitely like paying for advertising now, but I have 20 books. I have affiliate income, I have courses, I have things that make me money. So I pay for an advert. If I pay for, say, Stone of Fire, which is my first in series, there are 8 other books that people can read, or, they can come into my ecosystem and I will usually make my money back. The problem I see is many new authors paying for this type of advertising and then not getting a return on investment and then getting discouraged. Or realizing that it shoots you up the charts and then you disappear off the charts again. So I just want to come back to what I said at the beginning, which is about very much that long-term thinking, thinking where do you want to be in 5 years' time, not where do you want to be next week, and then taking the steps towards that over time.
And the best place to advertise, you think?
Well, that's what I was saying. I don't think there is a best place to advertise. it will depend on your goals, it will depend on your book and your genre and your budget and what the point is. So yeah, I don't think there is the best
And,
place.
and where your readers will be.
Yeah,
Because,
exactly. Like if you write YA, then go use Wattpad or that type of thing.
yeah. Let me see. I'm trying to think if there's any more. Oh, I love the Creative Pen site.
Yes, well,
The most,
let's just yeah,
the
let's
most
just
important thing authors should know.
yeah, we'll do this question and then that will probably finish us up.
Okay.
Yeah, so the most important thing authors should know, I'm just going to come back to what I said before, and that is you have to decide on your definition of success, and that this is a long-term game. So I think that you have to know yourself in a much more detailed way than a lot of writers do. So you have to really look at what is your personality. So, many writers are introvert on the Myers-Briggs scale, and a supreme number of us are INFJs or INFPs.
Yes.
I'm an INFJ. So go do a Myers-Briggs thing, because if you're an extrovert, I think it's very difficult to be a full-time writer because we spend so much time alone. And if you don't enjoy being alone, then this is a tough career. So that would be just a basic level of knowing yourself. And then things like social media, like we said, social media is great for introverts because you can schedule things, you don't have to do stuff live, you can hide behind your screen, that type of thing. Whereas, for example, when I first started out, I thought I would write nonfiction and earn all my money from speaking. Like people getting 100 grand for a speech. I was like, yeah, I could do that. And now I'm like, definitely not. I like speaking, but 3 times a year, maybe. But I much prefer writing. So this is the thing. You have to get to know yourself, get to know your audience. So, like like people who like JF Penn are people who read Stephen King. Sorry, that's not you, Frances. You like my non-fiction. Yeah, non-fiction. So this is the thing, you have to so therefore I should not try and sell you my fiction. I'm not going to do that because I know enough about me. I know enough about you now to know that there's no point in me trying to advertise my fiction to you. I advertise it to Stephen King's fans, for example. So this is the thing. A lot of this stuff, and I think a lot indie authors just go around doing must do this, or filling time, writing blog posts for tours or trying to get out there. Half the time, if you just stop, take a step back and think about who am I, who are my readers, what do I want my life to look like? Do I want to spend my time doing this, that, or the other? Do I want to run around after a Facebook group? Do I want to just schedule things? You'll have to do things that you don't want to do, but the majority of your time should be doing things that you enjoy and that are good for you and your readers. So that was quite a long answer, but basically know yourself, know your readers, understand your definition of success, and this is a long-term game. And for me, it's like the best job in the world, but it's definitely not for everyone. So yeah, go gentle on yourself. So I hope that helps.
That was a wonderful answer, Joanna. So before we conclude, why don't you share with all the listeners, Joanna, the URL to how to write a novel?
Okay, so if you go to thecreativepen.com/courses, there's my courses are there. There's also books, there's the podcast. So probably the best thing for people to do is go check out thecreativepen.com. If you like listening to my English accent, the podcast has 280 plus episodes now. There's the free Author 2.0 blueprint, which is probably the best place to start at thecreativepen.com/blueprint. And yeah, all the books. And if you like Stephen King, check out my fiction at jfpen.com. And I'm always happy to answer questions on Twitter at thecreativepen with a double N.
She has the best podcast, and I read a tweet the other day that someone had written Joanna, and the writer said that she'd been listening to Joanna's podcast for a year, and now she's a best-selling author. So that was
I can't claim I helped with that, but
Why, you have such great people on your podcast, and I know that I've learned a lot. So thank you for your podcast. It's just I always listen to it when I'm in the gym and I'm on the treadmill. It helps me forget about the misery of the treadmill. So I can listen to your voice. So I never have said this, but I happen to be Frances Caballo, and
Oh yeah.
I didn't introduce myself, and I'm from socialmediajustforwriters.com. So thank you, Joanna, so much. It's just been so lovely having you today. And thank you to all the listeners who were here and helped make this possible. So I'll be sending a recording to everyone who signed up for the webinar, and that's an added plus. So
Thank you.
thank you, Joanna.
Thanks for coming. Thanks for having me. Bye.
Bye.